Hey guys, we're ready to start the next chapter of Becoming Naomi Leon, but I can't find my book anywhere.
What happened?
I think Fazio might be sitting on it or hiding it from me because we had a fight this weekend.
What'd you do?
I ate all the ice cream.
Oh, he has every right to be angry with you.
Yeah.
Well, luckily, we're on this Zoom call, and there's this magical thing just for teachers where we can transfer objects through Zoom call.
Great.
Let you borrow my book because I'll just list. I actually had two, and I must have brought two home with me. So I'll let you borrow the copy I've been using.
Oh, great! Thank you. Yeah.
Ready? Here we go.
Thanks so much, Stacy.
Great. Let me run and just get my copy. It's just right here.
Okay, great.
Awesome. Got it.
Perfect.
I brought that extra one home.
Insane.
Spazio, shame on you.
I know.
Let's do something about it, man. Come on.
I'm gonna go out and buy him a pint of ice cream and make up for it.
You ate the good stuff, right?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spazio, I feel sorry for you, dude. You got a lot going on over there.
It is.
Do you guys just sit there when you can't sleep at night, just stare at each other?
Yes.
Like any games that you guys have created yet that we can sell to a mass market of people?
Not yet.
It's gonna happen.
All right, guys, we are starting chapter 16, A Team of Horses.
My niece would love this chapter just for the name. All right, let me mute myself.
Okay.
Mute.
Great. A Team of Horses, chapter 16. Finalmente, said Fabiola as I walked into the kitchen for breakfast. They would not tell us what they decided to carve until you got here. She turned back to the stove to flip a tortilla on what Graham called the black trivet. We will wait until everyone is here, said Bernardo. Pedro winked at me. Here's the rest of us, said Graham, with Owen and Reuben right behind her. My carvings were all over the table. Bernardo scooted his chair and pulled another chair over so I could sit between him and Pedro. ¿Qué? Said Flora. What? Tell us. Bernardo started talking fast and excited in Spanish, and Pedro nodded. Then Pedro stood up and paced around the kitchen, describing something and using his hands to express his excitement, waving them around. All this made his big belly dance. Fabiola translated. A gigantic branch like a big tree. Instead of leaves, there will be pigs and birds and fish and crocodiles. The panther lying here and an elephant sleeping there. Little parades, giraffes and monkeys all together. Pedro sat back down and reached over and hugged my shoulder. And on top, continued Fabiola, un león, the king of beasts. It will be maravilloso, wonderful. I was definitely going to add maravilloso to the superb Spanish words list. Shh, shh, the neighbors. They could hear, said Pedro, putting his finger to his mustache. People are jealous and could steal our ideas. Naomi, you can come to the market with me or stay and carve with these crazy men all day, said Graciela. I knew she was kidding. Aquí, I said, here. Graciela rolled her eyes. Bueno, como quieras. As you wish. She pulled a shade on the back door before she walked out. A few minutes later, Benny arrived. He backed a truck into the yard and unloaded tubs filled with twisted and gnarled, knotty and contorted red vegetables that didn't resemble any delicate little radish that came from Graham's garden. Graham stood over them with her hands on her hips. I have never seen anything like them in my life. Why, they look like giant overgrown yams that went through a pretzel maker. I think some of these are as tall as Owen. Bernardo, Pedro, and Benny each dragged a big tub of radishes into Flora's kitchen. Owen and Reuben had the job of misting the radishes with water so they would not dry out. They both took this duty seriously and sat on the floor with their water bottles ready, waiting for the first cuts to be made. Bernardo grinned at me and rubbed his hands together in anticipation. Then he picked up a knife and started to carve. What happens to these radishes after the festival? Asked Graham, who, of course, is very conscientious of recycling and reusing and not having waste. After the judging, each booth gives away the dolls and characters. It is good luck to have one of them on your table for your Christmas feast, but soon they dry up and must be thrown away. All that work and they only last a few days, said Graham, shaking her head. You know, I always have to fall back on what Vision said at the end of Age of Ultron. Thing is not beautiful because it lasts. But of course, said Bernardo, it is for the joy of doing it, of participating, and for the prize if you win. The men's fingers were nimble, and I was amazed they didn't cut themselves. They twisted and turned the radishes as if they were on spools, making impressions that often left the radish with a face or a remarkable feature, like an elephant's knee or a knotty whorl. Outside, the radishes were dark and brownish red. As the men scraped off the layers of skin, they revealed true red, the palest pinks, and in the heart of the radish, white. But the white was tainted as if someone had tried to bleach a pink blouse, and around the edges of the seams, the faintest trace of a rosy color remained. I watched the men make magic out of vegetable and copied them. The radishes, cut like potatoes, only firmer, and gave way much easier than soap, which meant I made more mistakes. Benny said I could carve anything I liked as long as it was an animal. I made little elephants, doves, bears, and squirrels, sticking at first to things I'd carved before. At the end of the day, we covered the radishes with damp towels and set them in coolers. The next day it was the same. We worked for hours, laughing and talking and singing songs in Spanish. I didn't even care that I didn't know all the words. Fabiola, Graham, and Flora made food and lemonade, and when Owen and Ruben's excitement could not be contained, Graciela took them away to find lucky spiders. On the last day of carving, Benny brought in a radish that looked like a giant bulb. What will you do with that? I asked. It is for the crown. The lion. We want you to carve it, to thank you for your idea. I looked at Pedro and Bernardo, and they nodded. I took the radish from Benny, knowing that this was an honor. I held it up and examined it. The lion should be sitting, facing us, with the front legs straight and resting on its back legs. That way I could carve the entire mane in a giant jagged circle. Yes, said Benny. Perfecto. I studied the radish again and made a few careful cuts. If I scraped a very thin layer of red in a long line, it curled slightly. Could I get a curly mane on El León? León. Thinking the name reminded me of the tiny thread of hope to which I clung. If my father came to the festival, would he see the radish tree full of animals and remember that what he'd carved for us all those years ago? Would it make him happy? Would he like to know that his daughter was a carver too? Today's the day, I whispered to Graham on the morning of the night of the radishes, waking her from a sound sleep. I had already dressed in my peasant blouse, jeans, and huaraches. Graham sat up and pulled the light blanket around herself. Naomi, what time is it? Early, but I couldn't sleep. Graham ran her hands through her thin hair and cleared her throat. There's something I want to say to you before you get going. I sat down next to her. Graham, everything will be fine. Now let me talk. Lately, practical matters seem to be closing in on me. Like what? Skyla might be right about a judge not wanting to separate a natural mother and her child, even after all the bad she's done. While I've been here, I've come to the conclusion that maybe I should be preparing you for that situation, just on the slim notion it might happen. I don't know how I would ever get along without you, but I'm more concerned with how you would get on without Owen and me. But it will not come to that, I said firmly. Let's just plant that in our brains. Graham laughed. I am pleased you have adopted my positive attitudes. But even if we do find your father, I'm just not sure what kind of cake this mess will turn out to be. What if he wants you and Owen for himself? What if he wants you children to stay here with him? Then what? Then you'll have to stay with us, I said, kissing her on the cheek, and you'll have to learn some more Spanish. After lunch, with Pedro, Bernardo, and Benny in the front seat, and Owen, Ruben, and me crowded into the back, we rode in the truck to the center of Oaxaca City. Behind us, in the truck bed, the coolers held the mysterious radishes. We unloaded the coolers and tubs of supplies on a corner, and Bernardo drove the truck back to Barrio Halatlaco. He would walk the 13 blocks back to the town square with the women. We looked like a caravan of horses, plowing through a field of tourists, our arms full of supplies, coolers, a metal wash tub filled with radish leaves, bags with extra knives for last-minute tweaks, a big plastic bowl filled with moss, which we could use as a carpet for the scene. After finding our assigned table, the boys and I waited while the men checked in with the officials. El Zócalo was a square park bordered with large trees, corralled in fancy black iron fences. Their wide branches created deep shade. In the middle of the park, a fountain bubbled, and manicured hedges protected the flower beds dotted with blooms, yellow, red, orange, and white, like the rainbows of colors in the fruit vendor's stall at El Mercado. Next to the street, long tables had been set up for the festivities, surrounding the entire park for a block in each direction. In front of the tables, a raised wooden viewing platform ran alongside, with a metal rail to keep those Graham called the looky-loos a reasonable distance back. Like a frame, inside a frame, inside a frame, the trees, tables, and viewing platforms boxed the entire park, with openings now and then through which people could pass. El Zócalo blazed with colorful paper flags and giant balloon bouquets. I looked at every man who passed on the street. Our father could be any of them. He could even be a man pretending to be our father, and I wouldn't know the difference, would I? Benny, Pedro, and I spread the moss on the table. Owen and Ruben took their posts with the water bottles, waiting to spray something, anything. It wasn't long before Graciela, Flora, Fabiola, Graham, and Bernardo arrived. I looked up at Bernardo. I want to stay and help set up. It is more important that you are with Fabiola and the others to ask about your father, said Bernardo. All of the carving is done. I promise we will make it look beautiful. And then you will be surprised, like all the other turistas. There is much for you to see as well. The judging wasn't until 5 o'clock, so we had time to start at the stall next to ours and walk slowly on the viewing platform around the entire park, along with hundreds of other people. The carvers added their final touches to their scenes and began to put out their secret best that they had held back until the last minute. I just can't believe that every detail of every figure has been made from a radish, or some part of it, said Graham. It is true, said Fabiola. It is forbidden to use anything else. One year, someone used a carrot to carve a figure for color, and they were eliminated from the competition. I could hear the comments of the tourists as they stood near us. Remarkable, magnificent, unbelievable. And it was all of those things. Dolls dressed in elaborate gowns, musicians with trumpets, nativity scenes with Mary, Joseph, and baby Jesus, plus the sheep and camels and wise men, bandits riding wild, rearing horses, tall angels holding harps, Christ dying on a cross, school buses with children waving from the windows, a 5-foot cathedral with the saints carved into the walls, just like the giant cathedral nearby, all made from giant radishes. Fabiola or Graciela asked at each booth about our Father. They found many who knew him well, but none who had seen him recently. With every person who shook their head, Graham's face nodded politely, as if to say, "That's okay," but her eyes were telling me a different story. As we slowly inched closer to our own booth, I took Graham's hand and squeezed it. She looked down at me, downhearted. "We're running out of time, Naomi." So much so that Stacy has just gotten up and left. Okay, so we've got some animals that we're carving, lots of groups of things.
You know what I was thinking?
Yes.
Communication, right? So I remember, like, I always found this very fascinating. I remember my mom would tell me stories when she was a kid, but I see it a lot on TV and stuff. Like for people, like her grandparents came from Norway. They didn't speak English. She didn't speak Norwegian. But somehow she knew them and she communicated with them. And I always think that, a lot of families have been separated. Families stay back in one country, other families come to America. I mean, I know other places in the world, but I'm thinking that we know the ones that come to America. And then when they meet their grandparents, they don't speak the same language. So I'm thinking she's in that house and she's carving with Betty. I know they're not her family, but their family. What constitutes a family? And she doesn't speak Spanish, but she's still communicating with them.
Yeah.
This whole thing about speaking really loud and Owen's kind of hard to understand. There's a lot about language. Isn't language one of our things?
No, but I wired it up.
It doesn't need to be written up, but just as you're reading it, I was just thinking, when I see things like that on, like, people go visit their families in a different country and the grandma's like, "Oh, I love you," but saying it in a language they don't understand, but they still find it's,
Well, I think it's pretty cool that Naomi gets to carve the lion. Makes me think of, what's her name there? Her friend, Blanca. Naomi the lion.
I'm the lion.
I love that. So she's carving the lion. They got the idea for what to carve from her. Do you think they're going to win the contest? Ooh. I mean, judging from what you know from stories like this, is she going to find her father?
Yeah.
Are they going to win the contest? Is she going to end up with Clive and Skyla and Sapphire?
Or is she going to stay in Mexico? Or is she going to stay with Graham? Is she just going to pack it up and just go out on her own?
How does the title of the book figure in
right.
to what's going on?
Funny
How is she becoming Naomi Leon?
Funny you say that, because when you were doing that and she was like, "Yo," and I had to go back to the title. I was like, wait, that's right. It doesn't say become a new outlaw. It's just, I actually was looking back at it. I had all these, I've read this book 1,000 times. Every time, like, come on, books.
There you go. We're almost done. We only have a few chapters left. So somehow or another, the story is getting wrapped up. 40 pages to go about. So what do you think is going to happen?
There's a few people that actually answer that question. And then other people I never hear anything from. But
I know.
There's a lot. Some people have no idea what they're thinking.
All right. So see you next time. Dum, dum, dum. Stacey, you want your book back?
Sure.
Yeah.
What are you going to do tomorrow? I'll just give it back to you.
Yeah, okay. Here, thanks, though. Close enough.
Edit that out.